So fill in the blank. Uh, to love God means
Oh. To love God means as fill in the blanks. Wow. Okay. The love language that we have as human beings are all five. And we know that these love languages can be of words, it can be touch, it can be time, it can be service, or it can be by giving of gifts. But of course, for the Lord, His love language is quite different among the five. And His love language is to simply to trust and obey His commandments or His instructions or His ordinances. Because in John 14:15, if you love me, that's what Jesus Christ says, you will keep my commandments. And verse 21 as well, a couple of verses later on, it also says that he who has my commandments and keeps them is the one who loves me. And the one who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and will manifest or will reveal myself to him. So basically, when we love God, it is simply to keep his commandments. By keeping these commandments, these are many. These are, a lot. And if you're going to go to the Old Testament in the scriptures, the overall commandments that God has instructed for Israel, and of course, to some people during that time, but overall, it's actually 613 commandments, and that's really a lot. One commandment is already difficult for us to follow. And for us to follow like 2, 3, and onward is already much harder to follow. But for you to have a command from the Lord to obey 613 is really ridiculous. But of course, not all of these commandments are applicable to everyone, because there are certain commandments that are only applicable if you get sick, or only towards the women who are about to give birth and all that. And there are certain commandments that are only applicable to those people who are young and to those people who have already aged in life. But overall, at some point in life, in some positions in life, the overall commandments of having 613 given to mankind themselves is already too much. But the question is, can it be easy? Can all of these commandments be followed? And the answer is yes. And what Jesus Christ, would say, in the book of Matthew, that of all of the laws, and the commands coming from the Lord through Moses, to sum them all up, is to simply to love the Lord. And by loving the Lord your God, what God wants from us is to love Him with our best, the highest, and the finest, which is to love the Lord your God with all of your heart, mind, soul, and strength. In other words, is to give everything that you've got, to love God. And by doing so, as you love God, you will be able to easily follow His commands by telling you this, that, and then another set of commands, and that. It'll be like a piece of cake, as if like as if like it never put up a challenge, against you of making the effort. And so that's how you love. And by doing these commandments, especially by keeping them, ingraining it into your mind, into your heart, practicing it day by day, in every moment, in every situation, with whoever, and especially in times when you're not okay, when things are down, and if you're still able to keep those commandments that God wants us to keep, then that itself is the love, that God wants from us. And so that is the summary of how you're able to keep all 613 is to love Him. And just before I close, the disclaimer here, a lot of commandments are no longer, of course, applicable to us in the New Testament era. And some of these commandments have some sort of change in its modification throughout our time, because things are very different as of now. But to love the Lord, your God, with everything that you have has never changed. That has always been the same. Whether if it's 613, more or less, That has never changed. And so, yeah. So to love God means to trust and obey His commands.